All right, guys. So today we are going to go through an introduction to the next lesson, which is the classification of living things. So now we are on lesson 5, our last one in this first unit. Today we're going to talk about the first two vocabulary words here, species and genus. You've probably heard the word species before, talking about a specific organism, but genus might be a new word to you. For now, don't worry about the rest of these vocabulary words. We're going to be talking about them a little bit later on in the lesson. And this picture here is of one of my favorite birds. This is a barn owl. They are very cool if you want to look up other photos. All right, so how do we classify living things? And when I say classify, I mean sort into different categories. So scientists can use different characteristics to compare and contrast organisms. In class, we've already talked about the characteristics that all living things share, like growing and developing, using energy, reproducing, but now we need to take into account both these similarities and their differences to put them into different categories. So scientists can look at their physical characteristics. Just what does the organism look like? Does it have bones? Does it have a shell, fur, hair, wings? How does it grow and develop? What is its diet? Where does it live? We can also take a look at these chemical characteristics. So in the last lesson, we talked about looking at DNA. So by comparing the DNA of one species versus another, we can also see if they should be in the same category or maybe a different category. And there are some other chemicals in an organism's body that we can also look at to help compare and contrast, like proteins or even hormones. So another thing that we're going to talk about in this lesson is how we name species. So a little bit of a history lesson. On the right, you can see this scientist. His name is Carolus Linnaeus. So back in the 1700s, he was responsible for creating a new system to name living things. So in his system, each species has its own unique, specific scientific name. So this is important because a species is the most specific that we can get when we're talking about living things. So organisms that are in the same species have the same genetic makeup, they can reproduce together successfully, and they're considered to be their own group. So this naming system, we have an example here. So for a mountain lion, the scientific name is Puma concolor. So puma is what we call the genus. So that is a category that contains not just the mountain lion species, but a few other species as well. And concolor is the name of the species. So that name is specific to this particular living thing. No other living thing other than the mountain lion has this scientific name. So why is this important? Why do we need scientific names to be so specific and so focused just on one individual? So if you think about it, with this organism here, our cat, common names are usually used for this organism. Maybe you would call it a cat, a feline, a kitty. Also, in other languages, we might call it a gato, gatito, in French, chat. So all of these names in all these different languages mean the same thing. But in the scientific world, if we're using all of these different names, it's really hard to know what organism we're talking about. So by using scientific names, so the scientific name for a cat is Felis catus. If we use that scientific name all over the world, everyone will know what we're talking about. So that's the helpful point of using scientific names, is that all over the world, if we talk about Felis catus in any language, they will know we are talking about cats. So later in the lesson, other than just a genus and a species, we now have other categories that we can use to sort organisms, going from very general to very specific. So later in the week, we are going to explore what those other categories are for now. But for today, it's important to remember that scientific names are specific to an organism and they contain two parts, a genus and a species.